Welcome back, warriors. Kwe Nindaluizi Pam Palmater, and I'm the host of this show, The Warrior Life. We cover everything from native sovereignty, treaties, and land back to decolonization, reconciliation, and how to support the struggle. So, if you're interested in hearing from Native peoples from sovereign nations all over Turtle Island talk about their experiences on the front lines of Indigenous resistance, resurgence, revitalization, and representation, then this is the podcast for you. And today's podcast is with an award winning journalist and author who describes herself as not the average storyteller. So stay tuned. You do not want to miss this podcast. Welcome back. Kwe Tansei Sego Anibuju. You are all in for an amazing podcast today. I'm literally still pinching myself, wondering, is this really true? Is she really here? I have been dying to talk to her for so long. We have with us none other than award-winning author and journalist, commentator, public speaker, activist, everything you can imagine, Brandi Morin. She is just one of my favorite peeps in the world. Welcome to the Warrior Life podcast, Brandi.
Tanse, Pam, so good to see you. Taniki, thank you for having me. And I just have to comment that, I first met you in 2014 when I was working with the Aboriginal People's Television Network, and I was fangirling over you. So, I've admired you long time as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, as usual, I have 1,000 questions I want to ask you because I know some time ago I was on your podcast. I don't even remember how long ago it was, and I got a chance to talk to you, but you were asking me the questions, and I had a million questions for you. So I've had to wait all this time to be able to ask you all these questions. But before I do that, protocol says that I need to offer you time to introduce yourself and your background the way you would like to introduce yourself.
Yes, so Tanze, bonjour, hello. I am Brandi Morin. I am Cree, Iroquois, French, coming to you from Treaty 6 territories in the lands of my ancestors. I am a member of the Michelle First Nation. And yeah, I am a storyteller and a new author as of recently.
That's so awesome for like a billion reasons. And don't let me forget to ask you about your community too, because it's something that I actually did research on. And there's so many issues around Michelle First Nation. But before that, your Twitter post says that you are not the average storyteller. So let's start with the background. Did you always want to be an author, a journalist, a storyteller since you were very little? Or is this something that just kind of came about as you grew up?
Wow. So I did not plan this out. I mean, I had a really kind of rough go growing up. So I grew up in and out of the child welfare system and, experienced a lot of different adversity. Um, you know, I always loved to write, I always loved to read. But it wasn't until I was 21 when I was actually living in a small town in southern Manitoba called Altona. And I just got this wild idea one day that I wanted to try to be a reporter. And I've always, been strong willed and I and motivated despite all of these, different struggles that I had been facing. And one day I approached the local newspaper and met with the editor and asked her, if I could work there, if I could write. And she took me under her wing, and I wrote on a part-time basis as a community reporter for about 8 months. I was living there, a single mom, like of two young kids, like they were just babies at the time. and I loved it. But I ended up having to move back to Alberta, and did not do journalism again for probably about 8 or 9 years. And I ended up doing administrative work and becoming a legal assistant in between, because back then there wasn't a whole lot of money available in that kind of work, like in local journalism. But I was doing a lot of soul searching when I was about 29 years old, and praying, and just asking what it was that I needed to be doing, searching for purpose. And one day, as I was praying, I got this thought that came to me, and it was a very specific thought. And this thought said, put together your resume and a cover letter and some samples of your work, and bring it into the local newspaper of my home communities, which was the Stony Plain Reporter, Spruce Grove Examiner. And at that time, that was something that was very intimidating to me, because uh, it was my home community, and they had a distribution of 50,000, and I thought, that was a really big deal. Plus, I was not formally trained. I did not have a degree as a journalist. I just really had that desire, that passion to tell stories. So I worked up the courage, and I took that folder, walked in to the offices of the newspaper, again asked to meet with the editor, presented, my work and resume and cover letter. And I asked, do you happen to have any, positions available, for a reporter, for a writer? And the editor looked at me and he said, your timing happens to be impeccable, because right now we have a position open for a full-time staff reporter. Now, you got to understand, in these small communities, it wasn't all the time that these opportunities came up. So I did have to work for that position. So they hired me on for a couple of weeks as a freelancer. I went through the formal application process, and I was up against people that had journalism degrees and more experience. But I prayed, and I felt like that was for me, that was meant to be, and I was hired. So I hit the ground running, and I learned everything as I went, and they were so good to me. I took every story with just excitement and care, like stories about grandmas baking pies and kids at school having book fairs, and just learning as I went. And that's how it all started for me. And then I eventually started telling exclusively Indigenous stories, which led me on a path to APTN, to the CBC Indigenous, to eventually doing freelances for some of the top media organizations in the world.
That's phenomenal. Like, literally phenomenal. You are like my dream come true. And I'll tell you why, because ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a news anchor and a journalist. So from the time I was in grade 3, I had something called PAM News. And I used to
Oh,
record myself on a little tape recorder, and I used to watch the news and report on it, report on what was on TV. And that was always my dream. But like, I went through university and I didn't do journalism, and I thought, oh, you can't do that unless you have a journalism degree. And here you've shown
yeah.
you can do it by hard work, by passion, by praying on it, by working towards it. You literally, from the ground up, made your dreams come true, and not just little tiny dreams. You are like this massive, well-known international journalist now, and it's just like, you are literally my dream come true. Like, you must inspire so many young people, Brandy.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
do you ever take a minute and sit back and go, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Oh, yes, all the time, and I'm grateful for that, because I take everything in, as a novelty. I'm traveling all over, and I'm in awe of everything they do and where I go. But just especially from where I've come from, because I had so many different struggles as a child, and then I am a survivor of missing and murdered, and I shouldn't be here. I ran away from a group home when I was 12 years old and was raped and held against my will. And I got out with my life and went on to struggle for many, many years and wander. And I was a single mom, of three kids by the time I was 24. I have four children now. I went through deep, deep depression. I went through, mental health crises like you wouldn't believe, that I talk about in my book, Our Voice of Fire. So when I look at where I've come from and what I have fought for, to be doing what I'm doing now, that's when I understand, um, the magnitude, of this. And I'm so grateful. But I'm also grateful for everything that I have come through, because I do not think that I would be as powerful as a storyteller and be able to connect with the people whose stories that I am bringing to the forefront if I also wasn't a survivor and a fighter, because the majority of the people are also survivors. They are living through crises. And so I think that those experiences help equip me, to be able to have the experience, as well as the heart and that care and the drive to do this.
Well, Brandy, I'm always heartbroken when I hear the stories of what our people have gone through, especially our women and girls. And in your case, I can't even imagine. Um, and, everything that I've seen you do speaks volumes about not just being a survivor, but being a warrior
Mm.
and, taking that battle on to fight for other people, to be an activist, to stick up for other people, to share their stories, because in those stories there is pain, but there's so much strength. You see about all of the people who have fought so hard to live another day, to
Yes.
raise their kids, to be a part of their communities, to be activists, whatever it is that they're doing. It's such a strong warrior spirit. And it's one thing, like if you look at everything that you've done and you imagine that you didn't have any of that pain or trauma in your past, and you think, wow, that's incredible. But to know the additional barriers, the additional challenges, it just makes it so much more phenomenal. And one of the reasons why I want people to come on this Warrior Life podcast with stories like yours is because it shows our youth that
Mm.
there is not one path to everything. That,
Yeah.
whether you have a formal education or not, you can do the things you want to do. Whether or not you've had difficulties, you can, with help and support, go on and do what you want to do, so that we can look at our people, as heroes, and not say that, oh, the standard has to be some kind of unrealistic perfection where, oh, that person must have never struggled in their life. That you
Mm.
can still do that. And you're such an inspiration for me in that way,
Mm.
Brandy. And I just, you must hear that so much from people. I know, like, social media is a mixed bag of people who love and people who hate, but you must get that response from people about how you spoke to their story.
Well, definitely. Just a side note, I don't know if you can see this, but I have warrior in Cree syllabic.
Nice.
I got that, a couple years ago to remind me when I'm doing this work and on the ground, if I ever feel afraid or discouraged, to remind myself that I am that warrior and
You
I'm on the
are a warrior.
warrior podcast. So, I mean, this work is, difficult in every way, but it's rewarding. And I consider this work justice work. I consider it human rights work. And I create relationships with, everybody. I think that is one of the most important aspects of being a journalist, being a storyteller, that maybe they don't emphasize enough in the traditional, schools where they teach how, on journalism. I think that you need to be able to build relationships, to connect with people, and create that rapport, but also to maintain that, because we're dealing with human beings, we're dealing with human lives. And in my case, the type of stories that I tell, many of these stories are filled with trauma, filled with injustice, but also inspiration. But this is something that you have to take care to do it in, some people call it trauma informed, to be able to follow up and make sure that these people have the supports and resources that they have, or that they're doing okay, right? But as far as, people being inspired by me and my work, I think it's been more recently that I have encountered that. And I think it might have to do with the release of my book and sharing my story more publicly. I have shared it in the past with APTN, when the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was first coming out, is when the first time that I spoke publicly about my own experience. But that kind of fell under the radar at the time. And then a couple of years ago, I was compelled to write about it, and I wrote for the Guardian, which is an international publication. And that reached a lot of people. And that, along with encouragement from one of my mentors, really propelled the process to me writing Our Voice of Fire. And it only came out in August 2nd, and it hit number one in Canada within a couple of weeks, which was mind blowing. Like, you think that you have a story to tell, and you pray that it reaches people and that it does good. But I was just blown away at the response. But the people that are reaching out to me now, sharing that they are inspired, thanking me, sharing similar, stories that and circumstances that they've overcome. That's been happening as of recently, and it's almost seemed to just coincide. The release of my book has come to coincide with all of, some of these major awards that I've won, even in the past couple of months. And I'm so thankful for it, because I worked for so many years, and you would know that for so long our stories really weren't taken seriously, or mainstream would often, not pick them up. And so that's why I wanted to start bringing them to international audiences. And so it's just so rewarding. And I say, finally, this work is starting to pay off, not for myself, but for the people, for the aunties, for the sisters, for the uncles, for the cookums, for everybody, for these stories, for this truth telling, and for this justice to get, for this to get out to the world.
Well, that's incredible. Our Voice of Fire has been all over social media. Everybody is raving about it. But the important thing for people to understand, maybe the two people who haven't followed you on social media, is that your book is in addition to all of your other awards that you've been involved in. So you're not just an author of this incredibly powerful memoir, but you've also won awards for other things. For example, the most recent one is the the first one, Canadian Association of Journalists Human Rights Reporting Award. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what was that for?
So that was a project that I did with the CBC when I was at CBC Indigenous, and it was a series that we worked on tracking the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, calls to action. So I had written a feature on, racism in, rural communities, specifically in north central Alberta. And so that feature, helped, contribute to this whole series. And we won the Human Rights Reporting Award, which was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Especially in that it's in relation to human rights, you know, because human
Mhm.
rights are just so fundamental. It's worldwide, it applies to everybody. It's something that's super powerful. Now, something else I saw just more recently on Twitter was this: the Native American Journalists Association. You didn't just win one award, you won award for Best Feature Story and Best Column. Can you tell us a little bit about those two?
Yes, so this was incredible to experience. I was able to travel to Phoenix, Arizona, for the conference of NAJA, which is Native American Journalists Association, and to accept these awards. So the best feature story category that I won was a feature that I had done with Al Jazeera English regarding the bones of our children being found who had attended residential schools. And I had traveled to Maryville, Saskatchewan, and met with a survivor there, as well as to Calgary, who another survivor um, who had also attended Maryville, and just a very horrifying account. I mean, I've been telling these stories for many years and of residential school survivors, but it just never gets easier, And this man, Barry, one of the survivors, he was forced to dig a grave for one of his classmates when he was a young boy by a priest, and I was there on the ground, and he was showing me where that happened. And another survivor from Calgary, Rosalind, her little cousin died in the bed next to her at residential school. And so these are living, tangible testimonies of these horrors of this genocide. And this story was, distributed to an international audience. And that was the story that won for that. And for the best column, I won for my writing that I do for the Toronto Star. I haven't been doing it as of late because I've been so busy, but I was really grateful for that award as well because I have received a ton of backlash specifically from that column. I have even received death threats for the subjects that I write about in regards to inequality and racism. So that meant a lot to me, and I'm really proud. And the awards, I don't know if you can see them, but one of them is behind me in that little plaque, and then one's just above. So I'm really thankful for that.
These are not easy stories either. So this isn't just a matter of typing up something clever about a key issue in politics or something. These are life and death stories. These are about trauma and pain. It's about heartache and loss. And so not only are you writing about all of that by the people who've experienced it, but you've experienced it yourself. And so writing these stories must also take a little bit of a toll on you as well every time, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And like my cookum um, was a residential school survivor at the Uville Residential School in St. Albert, not too far from here. Um, yeah, I mean, it just doesn't get easier. Like, even when I traveled to Rome at the end of March, beginning of April, to cover these historic meetings that Pope Francis held with Indigenous delegates and survivors. Like I had a few months to prep for that, and I thought that I would be able to handle it. And like as soon as I stepped off the plane in Rome, like there was this burden, this heaviness that fell over me. And I mean, we were in the land of the colonizers, right? Like where it was born in Rome. And so that week was just a storm. And so I was trying to focus on working and doing all that, but I would go back to my hotel room and cry like for hours and just trying to make it through. And then on the Friday of when we were in Rome, after the Pope apologized. Like nobody was expecting that to happen there because they, the delegates had invited the Pope to come to Indigenous lands to apologize, and so it kind of took people off guard. But I have to say, there's a lot of different controversy around the apology. People have a lot of different mixed feelings, but from what I experienced when I was there after going through that storm that I felt, that spiritual, that internal, emotional and physical storm, that it had been raining for like a couple of days straight in Rome. And when that apology happened, when those words came out, um, I was watching from the Vatican press room, and I ran out to the St. Peter's Square. Some of the delegates were coming out to address the media, and the clouds literally parted onto St. Peter's Square, and the sun was shining down in that area. And one of the chiefs, made a comment about it, about how that, that was a significant moment. And so it was a beautiful thing to witness. I ended up running over to a different area of St. Peter's Square. I left the scrum. I heard drums and singing in the distance, and there were dancers and singers. And Dr. Wilton Littlechild got out of his walker and started dancing around. And it was a really beautiful, sacred moment. And so I felt a lot lift at that moment off my shoulders. But yeah, it's very difficult no matter what situation I go into. But I find that I will carry that heaviness of everything. And then when I either write the story or it gets broadcasted in whichever form, that there is a release that comes with that when it gets out there. And so that helps. Not to say that it totally goes away, because Pam, I tell you, a couple of years ago, I had to start bringing sleeping pills with me on the road because it would be so crazy going into different situations with land defenders and police, or reporting on murders and different things, that I would experience massive nightmares and anxiety. So I had to take sleeping pills. But thank God I haven't had to do that as of recent, but it is a balance, and it's hard work. Like, this is human rights work. It's not, you're not just, you know, going in with a microphone, doing a little TV hit and walking out of there. I'm invested in this stuff, from the inside out.
Well, exactly. And I think that's what's different about Indigenous peoples, whether they're Indigenous academics or journalists or any of it. We're not like from the outside looking in. We're actually talking about the stories and the lived experiences of ourselves, our family members, other people. And so it's bound to carry that with it. And you can really tell in your reporting, because I've never seen you act in a way that sensationalizes anything, or the other extreme, trivializes it, acts like it's, no big deal. And I think that's the balance. That's like someone who really knows what trauma is, what pain is, and how to actually tell these stories in a respectful, heartfelt, and sensitive way. And you can really tell that, which is different than I don't have to tell you how the media has portrayed our stories and our voices for decades and decades. And I think that's what's resonating so much with people also, and that you're so real. You're literally totally grassroots. It's like just talking to your sister or brother, as opposed to, how sometimes in journalism, it just sounds very
scripted or
yeah.
robotic.
So how do you do that? Do you just decide
I don't know.
not to go with the process and just
the thing is, Pam, like, I learned as I went. I learned as, on the ground. And I learned just by, connecting with people. I mean, I had an ability to write. I had an ability to be a storyteller and stuff. But as far as the required process that, they say, that it should be done, I just went and did it. And, I've heard that from people before. Like, they'll say, "Oh, well, you're just so like authentic and real." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? Like, I'm not like going out of my way to try to be like, I'm just doing this work. But I think that you're right. I think because I go about this organically, that resonates with people. I definitely see that.
Yeah, totally. And I think about it like when APTN first came on the
Mm,
air and I first started watching their news broadcasts, and whoever was doing it like way back in the day, sometimes they would stumble over their words, or sometimes they would make a mistake, or sometimes they would smile or giggle on the air, and I was like, yeah, that's how news should be. You know what I
mm,
mean? Why would
mm.
you take 20 takes out of it? Because it was like, oh yeah, that's how we do it too. Everyone makes mistakes. It just seemed more
Yeah.
real and more realistic of real life. And that's what I like about how you are. You're
Mhm.
not doing it to be some, massive social media influencer, to sell, I don't know, hair care products or something. Not to put anyone down for that, because we all got to represent in different ways. But you're really respectful about all of this, and which is probably why you've won other awards and this most incredible rare award, very prestigious. I don't even know the whole background of it, but I know when I hear it that it's pretty significant. And so could you tell us a little bit about your Edward R. Murrow Award? Because
Yeah.
wow, Brandy.
Yeah, so yeah, this is again stunning. I didn't even know that I this series that I wrote had been submitted. So uh I had pitched a series on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, the highway of tears, and the extraction industry. I'd been pitching it for about a year before Al Jazeera English finally invested in it, and so I, along with my friend and photojournalist. She's award winning. Her name's Amber Bracken. She came and did the photography on it. But I produced a six-part major series uh, on this subject, and it Al Jazeera submitted it, for these awards, and I found out in October, and I didn't even know about these awards or what they were, but it's one of the most prestigious awards in the world, if not the most prestigious that you can win. These awards are based out of Washington, and they're having an awards ceremony in New York in October. And I'm waiting to see if I am going to be able to go to accept this award in person. But why I was so excited again to receive this, because I've fought and we have fought for so long for these stories to hit the mainstream. It's why I left APTN. It's why I left my cushy salary job at CBC Indigenous, because I was sick of the status quo. I was sick of feeling like I was in a box. I wanted to shout these stories to the world because there was so much apathy and indifference here in this country. And so it's paid off. And when I get this international award, when they've had thousands of entries from all around the world, to be able to get this for our people, for these stories, like I'm just so proud, so thankful, and excited about where we can take this work going forward.
Well, and the thing about this award is it really shows the strength of independence, the strength of being able to report and tell stories and inform and educate people without all of the corporate restrictions that
Mm,
are around organized news media. And that's not to kick them all down, they are what they are. But that it's the most powerful stuff seems to come from independent voices like yours, where no one's covering this, no one's
mm,
telling the real stories, no one's putting so much focus and effort into it. And so this award to me not only celebrates the fact that they were powerful and impactful stories that people need to hear and they are incredibly well done, but also the celebration of your voice and your independence, and you're
mm.
just like, no, I'm doing it this way. And the educating of people,
Yeah.
keeping this in the media, things that just weren't getting enough attention. And so like on all those counts, it's so much more than just an award. It's like a recognition how
Yep.
powerful your voice is, and how you're brave enough to go and be independent, because you know many people when they're in journalism or academia or you know anything else, you're so worried about being able to put food on the
Yeah.
table that you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to have to do it according to this way, to these prescriptions, because that's, I have to make my way. But you're like, no, this is important. I got to leave and tell these stories. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
must, you must see a huge difference.
It was like risky, and like when I did make that decision to leave the CBC Indigenous, I did have a setback. I had a huge financial setback.
Mm.
I had to, leave my apartment and move in with my dad for a little bit. But I'm so grateful for that setback, because less than 6 months later, I started writing my first piece for Al Jazeera English and getting these stories out internationally. And then followed the New York Times, and then followed National Geographic, and then followed The Guardian. And the things that I'm doing now, it's just incredible. So I'm so glad that I took that risk. Right. And yes, it's not for everybody, but I felt compelled to,
Mhm, mhm.
because, I just, I felt on fire, just like my book. It's so cliche, our voice on fire, our voice of fire, because it's just so important to me. And when it's that burning inside of you, when it's that purpose, like you 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 will not be settled or satisfied,
Mhm.
unless you pursue that, in my own experience. And so yeah, so yeah.
Well, what I love about that is, you know, like everyone's journey is different and everyone's situation is different at different times. You know, what someone can do in one
Yeah.
minute, someone else will have to do later. But your risk actually led to keeping these important issues in the media longer, high profile, all over the world. And that in and of itself puts that kind of indirect pressure on governments and
Yeah.
agencies and Canadians and Americans and everyone else to act. And that's the most important thing. To
Yes.
me, it never seemed like you're telling stories for the sake of it. It's
Mm.
always also a form of activism in a way, like you're pushing to keep what's happening
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like I say, this is human rights work. There are
Mhm,
human, indigenous, environmental violations, as you know, that are continually going on in Canada and around the world. And so I use this medium as a journalist, which I've worked up to have a very powerful platform. The media is a very powerful, influence in our world, and so this is the medium that I'm using to help bring some sort of justice, and awareness and truth, to these different situations. And people say, journalists, you know, or should be neutral and this and that, but I am not neutral when it comes to the violations of human rights.
mhm,
So,
and yeah, like, who is neutral? When they say, like, you need to be objective and neutral and, you know, all that stuff, it's like, "Oh, you mean I need to think and report like you have done for hundreds of
yeah,
years?"
exactly.
But yeah, not like us. Well, and the whole human rights bit, that's also been recognized, your work with human rights,
Mhm.
because as I understand it, you've
No.
also had 2 honorable mentions for Amnesty Canada Media Awards. Like, what, tell us what that's all about.
So I just found that out yesterday, and I have to actually look up which one. But
You
I
heard
think
it here first,
I
folks.
actually think they were related. One of them, again, was for the residential schools piece, that specific piece from Al Jazeera, even though I've done several different pieces. It was that one on the burials, and then another one for National Geographic on the burials. So I believe it was those. But from what I understand, it's significant to receive honorable mentions, because I didn't really know what that meant. But apparently, they do not always name or provide honorable mentions, and there's only one winner in each category. So they put one honorable mention, or sorry, so I got two. And so, you know what? I'm going to take that, because these are Amnesty Awards. the Edward Moore Award, this award, that is like fuel, that is like tools that I can use to take this work further. And so that's I'm really grateful. It's pretty awesome.
Well, and Amnesty International just does such important work, and they partner with Indigenous activists, Indigenous
Mm,
lawyers, Indigenous organizations. They, try to lift the voices so it's not just them always doing it. So that's really significant. I mean, Amnesty International, as you know, does this human rights work all over the world. So good on you and good on them for actually recognizing you. But
mm.
now we come to probably my favorite part about your new book, because for anyone who hasn't seen it, Our Voice of Fire, a memoir of a warrior rising, published by House of Anansi. And that's just recent, right? Like, isn't that just this year?
August 2nd it was released.
Oh, wow. So tell us, how did this book come about? Because as a book nerd myself, I'm always interested in the backstory, how a book came about. Is this something you'd always wanted to do? Did it come about because of
Mm,
something specific? Did someone inspire you? Like, what's the backstory?
yeah. So I had first, like I said earlier, shared my story of survival with APTN in 2016, and then with The Guardian a couple of years ago. But my former news director at APTN News, who then went on to become a mentor of mine and friend, Karen Pugliese, and she's just a powerhouse of an Algonquin woman and journalist, media guru. She had been like just putting in words over the years to me and saying, you need to write a book, you should write a book. But I didn't take her seriously. And I kind of just laughed her off because I was like, well, what do I have to offer? And then I started taking it seriously a couple of years ago. And I thought, you know what? Yes, I have this platform now. And people tell me their intimate stories all the time and their personal stories. And their stories help to provide truth, they help to provide inspiration. And so because of the crisis that we have of our missing and murdered women and these other, injustices, the residential school system, and all of these effects of the violence of colonization that is still going on today, I just felt compelled like to write it. So I took her seriously. I wrote a couple chapters. I found a book agent. They loved it. They helped me prepare a proposal, and you know that's when I signed with House of Anansi, and it really came together really quickly. That's basically how it started.
Wow. Well, that's exciting when you know that people in the background, and that's the other thing why I like the backstory, because sometimes it's people who are mentoring, some people were giving you a nudge when you didn't think, that maybe you could. And there's always like important people in our lives. Sometimes they're in our lives forever, sometimes they're just a little bit. You never know when you're going to meet them. But look at Karen, just that little
Mhm.
tiny bit of, nudge forward. Obviously, you had to write the book. And so now it's just come out.
Mhm.
What's the sort of content in the book for anyone who hasn't seen it yet?
Yeah, so it is a very difficult read. So it chronicles my story of my life growing up in and out of the foster care system, being a rape survivor as a child, and overcoming a lot of adversity. But then it goes on to chronicle my rise to this journalist for justice. So it ends up being very inspirational. I do talk about some of my experiences on the ground and some of the stories that I cover as well. I was wondering, I could read a quick little passage to you that I find that's inspirational. How do you
Yes,
feel about that?
yes, please. Oh my gosh. I never want to
Okay.
ask in case people don't want to give any spoilers, but yes, please.
So this little story is something that I experienced last summer, 2021, after I had been covering the repatriation of Lakota children that had passed away after being stolen and taken to the Carlisle Indian boarding school thousands of miles from their homelands. They were taken to Pennsylvania. So I covered the repatriation of their remains back to the Lakota, to the Rosebud Sioux Nation, where they held a beautiful traditional burial ceremony for them. I was covering that with National Geographic, but during my time there after that week, I had the opportunity to go to a ranch there, and so I will read about that experience here. During my visit, I was given the opportunity to fulfill another one of my lifelong dreams: horseback riding on those beautiful wild lands. I visited a ranch that specialized in working with people who have endured trauma, survivors of violence, offenders, troubled youth, and paired them with formerly abused horses. Greg Cloud, our guide and manager of the program, asked me if I wanted to do a traditional spirit connecting ceremony with the horses. I must admit I was a bit nervous because I didn't know what it entailed. But something was pulling on my spirit, so I agreed. He led 7 horses into the round paddock and then directed me to stand in the middle with him. You just need to wait here, Greg explained. The horse will choose you. Trust the process. A couple of ranch hands encouraged the horses into a gallop. They ran around the perimeter twice in one direction and then twice the other way. I followed them, turning my body in a circle as they thundered around me, their manes flowing, nostrils snorting, and hooves pounding the hard-packed earth. The force of their power vibrated through every cell in my body. Then the horses stopped, and the silence was equally deafening. I waited as I'd been instructed. After a couple of minutes, one of the horses broke from the group and approached me. His red and chestnut coat blazed in the sunlight. He had white socks that showed off his large hooves. I swallowed and stood as still as I could. Trust the process, trust the process, trust the process, I chanted in my mind. The horse stopped in front of me, lowering his head so his liquid brown eyes could meet mine. His ears pricked forward in curiosity. I smelled his hay-sweetened breath as he huffed a greeting. That's Socks, Greg said, approaching the two of us. Former rodeo horse. He used to be tied up and abused something terrible by his former owner. Socks's ears flicked backwards at the sound of Greg's approach, but he kept his gaze on me. Socks. He usually chooses leaders, said Greg, stepping to Sock's side and stroking his black mane. But they don't know they're leaders yet. I felt something catch at my throat. That's the thing, Greg continued. The horses always choose the rider who is most like them. Socks is powerful, but he doesn't always know it. That abuse went deep. But when he gets outside the fences here and into the pasture, he realizes he's free. And he realizes he's boundless. That's a sight to see. The tears broke like a dam. That was me, all right. For so many years, held back by the invisible restraints of former abuse. But I am a leader. I am coming into my own. I need only to step out of these enclosures built by fear, and then I will be truly free to live into the strength and power that I already possess. I touched Socks on his whiskery velvet nose and thanked him for his gift. Ready to ride? Greg asked.
Oh my goodness. Brandy, that's just that one passage alone. I feel like it signifies everything. Please tell me you are going to do an audiobook, because
it's already out there and it's narrated by me.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I was going to say, and please make sure you use your voice, because not only are your words powerful and moving, but you saying them, like you can see and feel and hear the passion in your voice. I feel like your title, Our Voice of Fire, just, oh my gosh, it's just so perfect.
Mm.
And your writing is beautiful. I can't believe it. I'm going to get both. I have to get the hardcover book, or the paperback book, and I have to get the audio book, because you really feel it when you're saying it. You know where it's coming from. And the subtitle there, a memoir of a warrior rising, that's just it's perfect. I mean, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about this book?
It's awesome. It's a little bit surreal. Like, sometimes it's amazing. Like, it's amazing to have a book out there. It's a gift. It's something that is a document that will be there, potentially, forever, as long as this earth endures. And so I'm proud, and I'm proud for my kids. I have 4 children, and they have my oldest 3 lived through a lot of the struggles, and they're all doing incredible now. And for them to see all of this happen, I'm so proud, because I'm showing that next generation within my own, that they can do and be, what their heart desires. And then I have a little 4-year-old, Alasia, and a whole different experience raising another little girl, but she's able to have me as a mother when I'm not necessarily in survivor mode, and experience all of this. So that's what I'm really proud of. And again, it's a bit surreal at times. Oh, I wish. There's some really exciting things coming up, and I want to tell you about them, but I can't tell you on here.
No,
I'll tell you privately after.
Okay. Because I'm going to say, that's one rule you can't ever do. Say, oh, I know something, but I can't tell you. Okay, how about this for a deal? Is there anything you're working on now that you can tell us about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh gosh, so I'm doing so many different things. So, like, primarily I was a print reporter, but I've worked in broadcast. I'm doing podcast documentaries now with Canada Land, and so I believe, like, I want taking advantage of all the different mediums of storytelling, and that we should, right? Because people take in stories differently. Some like to hear them, some like to see them, some like to read them. So I'm working on 2 major documentary feature films right now. And one of them is around the apology, and one of them is in pre-production, but it's with a major Hollywood production company. And I'm so excited about it. It's around Indigenous rights. And gosh, there's things happening with my book, and so many things. I'm actually, my heart is always being like on the ground and in the stories. So this evening I'm heading out to Vancouver, and I will be in Smithers tomorrow morning to head out to Wet'suwet'en territory. I've been covering that crisis there for a few years now, and unfortunately the Coastal GasLink pipeline company began drilling under their sacred river this week. This is what they have been fighting to stop for all these years. That they've endured brutality, violence from police, and arrests at all different levels. So I'm going back on the ground, and we'll be doing that.
Well, that's one of the things I really admire most about you, because you are doing these big and amazing and important things, but you always prioritize our people on the ground, the people who are dealing with, unmarked graves, or trying to protect their families from murdered and missing, or the Wet'suwet'en land defenders who have been there, and all they're trying to do is protect the waters and the plants and animals. Like, you would think that would be a no-brainer, but your coverage of that it's real, it's raw, you get to see what's happening at the time, and hopefully motivate Canadians to pressure governments to stop this nonsense. And you make sure that they have a voice too, and you keep it in the media. And I think I admire that the most about you, Brandy. Of all the things I admire, it's so important that you stay so connected.
Oh
to
gosh. well, even when I said, like, when I wrote a book, I said I never want to be one of those people that like writes a book and just does like a bunch of book stuff. Like, my heart is on the ground. My heart is in these stories, and that's what I want to, continue to do for a long time. So it's such a privilege to do this. And I recognize that, and think about that all the time. And you have to understand that, like, even in this case of the Wet'suwet'en, this is what they have left. This is what has not been stolen and completely destroyed by, colonizers. This is the last of the last that they have. And it's something rare and beautiful that they have, because not every nation has this. Some people are in these reservations, that have been, completely depleted, and they have something that is so intact and beautiful there. And so
Mhm.
this is not just Indigenous rights, this is human rights. These are situations that will impact all of humanity, because the consequences of it are very broad and telling of where we are at as a society. So yeah, it's extremely, extremely important.
And it must be even more impactful to you given the history of what the government has done to Michelle First Nation.
Oh,
Just the complete trying to destroy, extinguish that whole
mm,
community, the injustice that continues for all of the people who are rightful members of that First Nation, and their age-long struggle to say that what was done to them was wrong, and that they are as deserving of recognition and
mm,
reparations, and justice as
yeah,
anybody else that has been so negatively impacted by the government. And my heart goes out to you and your family and any of those community members, because I know from the time years ago when I was doing my research on Indigenous identity and belonging, that this here's a prime example of
yeah.
the power that the government has to just try to erase people.
Yeah. So, for anybody who's not familiar with the Michelle First Nation, so our family, our reserve was located just west of Edmonton in the St. Albert and Sturgeon area. And, one of my great grandfathers signed an adhesion to Treaty 6, when these lands were given as a reserve to the Michelle people. Our traditional territories extend from that area all the way to Jasper, though. Now, our people, were thriving at that time, and the government, were looking for an example, for enfranchisement, and they chose the Michelle people. And it was done very corruptly. There was only a couple of Michelle members that participated in this so-called vote to uh, complete the enfranchisement. But basically, the government offered the Michelle, in exchange for giving, up rights and full assimilation, that they wouldn't have to send their kids to residential school, that they would be given, proper equipment, tools, and everything for farming and different things. And so some members, agreed to that, and some didn't. And what happened was the Indian agent at the time came in and ended up scooping up our lands for a very cheap, cheap price exchange, and selling them um, to settler farmers. And eventually we were completely enfranchised. Now, our many of our band members did regain their treaty rights and status, including my Cookum. But our nation, as the Michelle, is not legally recognized as the Michelle First Nation, but we are recognized by the Treaty 6, of First Nations, as well as, other nations. And we have been in uh, the courts with the Canadian government for 30 or 40 years now, but it's finally making progress. And I don't really give a crap if Canada doesn't recognize me. I recognize myself as a
Yeah.
sovereign Michelle woman. Yeah, so that's the basics of that.
Well, and I think it's important for people to know, because, this podcast is all about, celebrating all of our warriors, but it's also about education and information for the purpose of taking action and supporting people and nations where we can. And,
Mm.
just before we sign off, I always ask our guests here, is there anything in particular, any call to action that you would make for Canadians to support you in your work, or Michelle First Nation, or any issue in particular?
Wow. I just think that people really need to reckon and understand what is going on their own backyards. I think that just people are ignorant or apathetic to it, but there are serious human rights violations happening here. And the colonization has not stopped. The effects, of all of these systems is still being felt. And so I encourage and challenge people to educate themselves, to reach out and get to know their community members, get to know the Indigenous people around you, and learn where you can ally with them to make to make a difference.
Oh, such important advice. It's like, know where you are. Whose land are you on? What are the issues that the local First Nations, Inuit, or Métis are facing? What are their calls to action? And what can you do to contribute to those calls of action? Instead of, sometimes people think they can just come up with their own solutions. It's like,
Mm.
let Indigenous peoples take the lead and support those calls to action. And I'm going to say, because Brandy's a little bit too humble here, also support Brandy. Follow all of her work. You can follow her here on Twitter at Songstress28. You can follow her on Instagram at B Morin Stories. You can buy her book, Our Voice of Fire, a memoir of a warrior rising. You can do simple things like share, comment,
Mm.
retweet, all of those things, so that the algorithms get triggered and everybody will get the benefit of Brandy's voice, because she is doing amazing things. And that horse was right. You are a leader. You have been a leader. And I'm sure more things are going to come from you. And I'm so glad I have you to look up to, Brandy. And thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Oh my gosh, Pam, like I can't even believe I'm hearing this from you, because I have looked up and admired you and your work for so many years. So I can't even believe that I'm hearing this from you. And I am thankful. So Kazakitin, hi. Yeah, I'm blown away. So thank you.
Thank you, sister. And thank you to everyone who listens to this podcast wherever you get podcasts, or watches the Warrior Life podcast on my YouTube channel, where you can click on the closed caption and read the closed captions. Thank you for anything you can do to support all Indigenous creators and activists and leaders on the ground. And till next time, keep living a warrior life. Walalia.